come on, let's edit this script, you idiot. Okay, how about this? Every time I read through the script, beginning to end, I can eat a piece of dried lamb liver. How does that sound? If you don't write an intro to this video right now, I will go straight into the kennel without dinner. How about that? I think I've got writer's block. Reviewer's block? Maybe I'll just play some video games and watch a scary movie and relax. Maybe tomorrow I will be more productive. Why is artistic creativity so strenuous? Such a sacrifice of mental, physical, emotional energy. I'm typing this section of the script while in the break room at work, by the way. Anyways, is there any way to circumvent or offload this cost? To hack the cost? Hack it up with an axe, perhaps? Wait a minute, I think there is. Maybe you've seen some stories about that. Like that episode of Tales from the Crypt, Incel Kill Ya, where Tim Roth plays a painter who gains success from his morbid painting of a dead body and starts killing people to fuel his artistic creativity. Or what about that 1959 movie, A Bucket of Blood, where a struggling artist hits it big in the beatnik scene after a plaster-covered dead cat is mistaken for a beautiful sculpture. And so he begins killing people and covering them in plaster to fuel his artistic creativity. And didn't that movie Art School Confidential have a plot along these lines? And that movie Nightcrawler kind of did as well. And you know what? It wouldn't be my first time either. I have committed so many gruesome murders, despicable, senseless killings for the sake of my art. So many dead cops and postal workers sacrificed to the algorithm gods, or sacrificed to fuel my video output. In fact, let's talk about that. That and some other stuff as we take a look at Lucky, a 2004 film directed by Stephen Kudin, starring Michael Emanuel. Like those other stories, this film is about an artist who murders to fuel his artistic creative output. Our main character, Millard Mudd, is a down-on-his-luck cartoon scriptwriter who meets a talking dog named Lucky, who helps him get out of his slump by fueling his creativity with murder. Talking dogs, script writing, murder, these are all things that I'm intimately familiar with. More than this, though, this movie has something that those other stories don't. You see, Millard Mudd isn't just a struggling artist fueling his output with murder. He's also an alcoholic 4chan edgelord incel neat. The film doesn't explicitly say that, of course. I mean, those terms didn't come into common parlance until like a decade after this movie came out, but that's essentially what's going on here. You see, Millard Mudd isn't just a down-on-his-luck alcoholic cartoon script writer with a talking dog. He thinks he's very profound.
It's all perception. What exists only exists because we choose to allow it to exist.
He thinks he's better than other people.
I made a list of people who wronged me. Someday they would all pay.
He's socially inept.
Looks like it keeps you in pretty good shape. I guess it is pretty grueling work.
Moron.
Sorry.
He's single.
My problem was, I lived alone for too long. I had no female companionship.
And constantly mocked and belittled by women.
Get away from me, you twisted creep.
Do you have to ask permission for everything you do? You know, it's a real turn-off.
Moron.
Sorry.
What a stupid fucking dork.
In fact, outside of Millard and the titular Lucky of the film's title, every other character we meet in the story is a woman. And if I were to give a really aggressive reading, it could be argued that Lucky, the talking dog, is kind of a deranged Jordan Peterson, Andrew Tate figure, initially helping Millard, telling him to clean his room and not drink so much and get some work done, but eventually bossing him around and forcing him on this grind set and making him miserable and turning him against all of the women around him. But we'll see all that in action as we walk through a little synopsis of the story. We start with a pan through the house where Millard spends most of his time, when he's not refueling at the liquor store anyway. Beer cans and garbage litter the backyard and are all throughout the house, and he explains that he's a cartoon writer who's down on his luck and his life is falling apart. Then he sits down to write. But he's out of beer, so he drunkenly goes off to the liquor store to get more. Then we get this big monologue about infinity. And if space is infinite and full of infinite matter which cannot be created or destroyed, then that means that if we traveled far enough in one direction, we would eventually run into the exact same world we left, down to the atom. I thought this shit was like super deep when I saw it for the first time as a young pup, and I mean, it's not without substance, but it's obviously intended to be silly. Basically, it's setting up both that Millard is a little full of himself and that he's an unreliable narrator with a limited sense of reality and morality. While drunk driving and monologuing about the universe, Millard runs over a dog named Lucky. He goes to see if the dog's okay, and it isn't, but he takes it home and tries to clean it up and nurse it back to health. After cleaning it up, he decides to let it rest while he goes back to work. But as soon as he sits down to write, the doorbell rings, and we meet a woman who is there to pick up Millard's completed cartoon script. Only right now, he doesn't have one.
I'm sorry.
What?
I'll call you as soon as I find it.
Sure, Mud. Whatever you say.
What a stupid fucking dork.
He imagines the woman laughing it up with her friends about how much of a pathetic loser he is. Anyways, she leaves and he can finally sit down to write, but the doorbell rings again, and it's a woman from the electric company there to read his meter, and she mocks him for all the empty beer cans in his backyard. After this, Millard goes off to write again, but he should have remembered rule of threes, because as soon as he sits down, the doorbell rings yet again. Now it is a female door-to-door evangelist. He fantasizes about inviting her in and cutting her head off with a chainsaw, but ultimately he just closes the door in her face. I feel like a better third interruption to his work would have been a pizza delivery worker who could then berate him for being a lazy slob with no friends or family to share this large pizza with, and how he's gotta eat it alone because he's pathetic, or something like that. Anyways, after all this, Millard needs to take a break from all of this writing that he didn't do. So he sits in his hot tub full of empty beer cans in the backyard and reflects on how pathetic and lame he is. And being an incel, neat type caricature, Millard obviously thinks that all of his problems would be solved if only he had a woman in his life. And he reflects on his past friendships with women. A stripper who was into BDSM who mocked him for being an idiot, his first cousin or half-sister or something, who is a trans woman who mocked him for being sheepish, an elderly woman who I guess didn't really mock him, but him being so desperate he's going after an elderly woman is kind of the joke within itself, a nun who mocked him for being a creep, and a woman in a wheelchair who mocked him for being a disgusting slob and spitting in his face. You see, I told you this was about an incel neat type guy. And you can say, hey, he's not technically a neat, he's got a job writing cartoon scripts. But does he really? Don't you kind of have to write scripts to have a job writing scripts? Anyways, following this, he fantasizes about the perfect families he saw on old TV shows.
And obsessing what it would be like to go on a date with Marcia Brady, or to be Marcia Brady. If I was Marcia Brady, I'd stand naked in front of my bathroom mirror and just look at myself all day long.
Well, he failed with all the women he dated, and he is hated by all the women that he knows currently, and he can't have the perfect wife from an old TV show, so what is there left to do but to create a woman within your mind? And Millard invents a fantasy woman he names Misty, who will hang on his every word and ignore his alcoholism and his sloppy man-baby lifestyle. Days passed, and Millard drinks and tries to write scripts and hangs out with his imaginary girlfriend Misty, all while the dog Lucky has been sleeping this whole time. Then his doorbell rings yet again, and it's his agent at the door saying that he missed a meeting that they were supposed to have a few days earlier. After seeing the state of his place and his drinking, she berates him for being a man-child who squanders his opportunities and drops him as a client. I guess Millard's downward spiral continues. Since Lucky hasn't moved in days, or breathed for that matter, Millard decides to bury him in the backyard. But once Lucky is placed in the hole, he miraculously comes back to life. Not only that, he can talk. And in a deep, sultry, masculine voice too.
Hey, man. Why don't you write about a boy with no eyes that has a wonder dog that flies and solves crimes.
While back in the house, Lucky bosses Millard around, making him cook them food and brush his teeth and clean up the house and slow down on his drinking, and he sets him to work writing a script about a blind boy with a crime-solving flying dog. I don't think cartoon writers usually get to pitch cartoon ideas like that, but I guess let's just go with it. Although Millard doesn't appreciate being bossed around by a dog, he is very happy to have a cleaner, more productive work environment, stating,
You know, without you, none of this would have happened.
Ah, well, you had something to do with it, too.
Before long, Millard gets contracts with several major cartoon studios, and his confidence is booming. While walking Lucky, Millard bumps into Misty, the woman from his fantasies. It turns out Misty is a real person and walking her dog. Misty loves animals and cartoons and guns. She's exactly the woman from Millard's fantasies. After a few weeks of hanging out, Millard wants to have sex with Misty, but he fears that reality won't live up to all of his fantasies about her from the past. Not only this, she'll probably just judge him afterwards. Lucky says the problem is that he's not being honest with her. He needs to tell her the truth about his scripts, that Lucky, the talking dog, came up with all the ideas. So, Millard tells Misty he has a talking dog, and she's confused by this, and he asks if she still is gonna come over later and hang out and watch cartoons, but that doesn't seem likely. Afraid that his honesty blew up in his face, and that Misty either thinks he's completely crazy, or maybe just thinks he's a pathetic loser who steals cartoon script ideas from talking dogs, whatever the case may be, he's screwed up his one and only chance at love, and Millard goes to the liquor store to drown his troubles in beer. While he's gone, Misty comes over, but the only one home is Lucky.
I don't care if Millard is insane. I still like him. If you can really talk, then you'll tell him that for me, okay?
Whatever you say, doll.
Millard comes back home, none the wiser, and just continues on that grind set that Lucky has him on, writing cartoons, keeping the place clean, and all of that. But it's been weeks and he still hasn't seen or heard from Misty. In response, Millard begins fantasizing about Misty again. But after interacting with and being turned down by the real thing, his fantasies quickly turn violent. More and more violent.
Are you gonna skin me alive?
I thought about it.
I don't want to be skinned alive.
No one does. And when I'm done, I'm gonna need a souvenir.
How about a tooth?
A tooth? I like that.
With his grind set frustrations with Lucky and his sexual frustrations with Misty weighing on his mind, Millard gets into an argument with the woman who is there to pick up his scripts, and the secret about Lucky is discovered.
It was the work of a dog. And now, I'm gonna let everyone know the truth.
No, you can't. It'll ruin me. I'll never work again.
Okay, so this is genuinely hilarious. Like, what the hell am I even watching right now? But anyways, Millard tries to stop her, and the altercation results in the woman being thrown to the floor and dying. But hey, if I can believe her line about telling the world about the talking dog, then I can believe her dying from being shoved to the floor. I mean, I'm a talking dog and you take me seriously, don't you? But whatever, that's besides the point. Millard buries the woman's body in the backyard and goes back to his regular routine. However, Millard is not just fantasizing about Misty anymore. Now that he has overpowered the delivery woman and killed her, he's no longer intimidated into sheepishness from her mockery. Now he finds her quite attractive, so he digs her up and has sex with her.
The best part about doing with a dead girl was you didn't have the pretense of foreplay or endure the pressures of making sure to please her.
And before he puts her back in the ground, he takes one of her teeth as a souvenir, just like Misty suggested in one of his fantasies about torturing her. After all this, Millard goes back to his routine. He's writing scripts, he's keeping his room clean, he has a run-in with his former agent who wants to work with him now that he's getting all these contracts, but he turns her down, and he realizes he likes women who don't speak, kind of like the dead delivery girl. So he goes to dig her back up again to have some more fun, but Dun dun dun! He finds Misty's body buried in the backyard as well, with her face chewed off by a dog. He confronts Lucky and even tries to kill him at one point, but he is outsmarted at every turn. Not only this, but digging through the backyard, it turns out that all the other women from the story, as far as we've seen so far, were also killed by Lucky. Or potentially Millard, who has an alter ego as Lucky, since Lucky is probably long since dead by this point. Who knows? Anyways, Lucky reminds Millard,
You forget the laws of physics. Energy can either be created or destroyed, only transferred. When a life is extinguished, the energy has to go somewhere.
Into my scripts?
Now you catch it on, Shakespeare.
it's just like Is'll Kill Ya and A Bucket of Blood and all those other stories about murders fueling artistic output. Millard has become a shell of his former self. He doesn't interject in the script writing process anymore. He just does whatever Lucky tells him to. He starts wearing women's clothing and dancing around and crawling on his hands and knees and barking like a dog. And eventually, Lucky decides that he doesn't even want to kill people anymore. He wants Millard to do it for him. I mean, Millard's already killed the delivery woman, and he's been walking around with a necklace full of women's teeth, and he's got like a bunch of women buried in his backyard, so why not, I guess? Well, since basically every woman that Millard knows is dead, he decides to kill the last one left, the woman who runs the liquor store he goes to every day. And he says,
I could accept rejection from a girl like Misty, but not from someone like Wendy. She was a very unimportant person. In a way, I was about to do her a favor.
He decides to keep Wendy, the liquor store cashier, as a pet to repeatedly torture and sexually assault. I've never owned a pet, but I'm pretty sure that's not how you treat pets. Anyways, eventually she dies from this treatment, and so he turns her over to Lucky to be eaten. Despite his success, Millard is still spiraling downward. He's wrapped around Lucky's little finger, or toe bean? And so Millard tries to fight back in any way that he can. He carves a swastika in his chest as a form of bratty, petulant child behavior. He even tries again to kill Lucky, and even kill himself, but every time, Lucky just calls his bluff and mocks him at every turn. So Millard does the next best thing. He just buys into what's going on. Rather than doing what Lucky tells him to for Lucky's sake, he decides to do all of those same things, but do them for himself. He stops killing for Lucky and he starts stalking and killing random women for himself to empower his own creativity, to fuel his own script writing. He's gone full-blown serial rapist, serial killer.
I grew stronger and stronger, and I could write better. The ideas came to me like they never had before, but this time the ideas were mine.
So Millard is on this grind set, working his life away. He's ruined all his potential friendships and relationships. He's killed every woman he's ever known and put all that energy into his work. He's more successful than ever, but he hates his life and he misses Misty. He decides he wants to be with her again, to finally be free of Lucky's grasp. Or like lockjaw. Millard takes out a handgun and he joins Misty in the afterlife. Roll credits. So this is a fun movie, and I recommend checking it out if you can. And the lessons of this film are certainly interesting as well. Although, when it comes to creative output, I think many folks have the opposite problem as Millard. They neglect their hobbies and neglect developing skills in favor of vegging out on social media or streaming platforms or whatever. But with this whole red pill boom about getting that bag and getting on your grind set and you'll meet women later, don't worry about it. And that's a problem. Y'all should be setting time aside for developing healthy interpersonal relationships. Maybe the lesson from this film is something that people really need to learn right now. And isn't that what scary stories are all about? They're like parables, right? Anyways, I'd like to thank my wonderful patrons. Your tremendous support has allowed me to get dog insurance, which is wonderful. You've allowed me to support other creators that I couldn't otherwise support. Gotta love that. You provide me with a little extra funds for books and dog toys and things like that, which is really awesome. I appreciate you folks a lot. And if you're still feeling the spooky vibes, please check out my previous Halloween videos. There should be a link on the screen somewhere or in the description or whatever. And if you like what I do here and you want to support the show, you can go to patreon.com/radicalreviewer. Thanks for watching.
It was the work of a dog. And now, I'm gonna let everyone know the truth.